July 20th, 1944. A bomb explodes inside Adolf Hitler's headquarters, but Hitler survives. Within hours, a bloodbath of revenge begins that will kill hundreds of people, including a high-ranking general who dared to betray the Nazi government from the inside. His name was Hans Oster, and his final moments were among the most brutal executions of World War II. This wasn't just any German officer. Oster was a master spy, a double agent working against his own government, and a man who risked everything to stop Adolf Hitler. But when the July 20th plot failed, Oster's fate was sealed. What followed was a nightmare of torture, terror, and one of the most horrifying methods of execution ever created. Let's uncover the full story. On July 20th, 1944, a place called the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia became the site of one of history's most daring assassination attempts. A colonel named Klaus von Stauffenberg placed a briefcase bomb beneath a conference table where Hitler was holding a military meeting. The explosion tore through the room, killing 4 people instantly and wounding more than 20 others. But Hitler survived. A heavy oak table leg shielded him. He only got minor injuries, burned pants, a damaged eardrum, and temporary eye problems. The failed assassination triggered something called Operation Valkyrie. This was the conspirators' emergency plan to overthrow the Nazi government and create a new government. For a few precious hours, it seemed like the plan might actually work. Army units began moving across Germany. Key Nazi officials were targeted for arrest. But then news broke that Hitler had survived. The plot collapsed. There were communication breakdowns, hesitation among senior officers, and Hitler's broadcast to the nation doomed the conspiracy. By midnight, the conspirators were being rounded up. Many were executed on the spot. Others would face far worse fates. Hitler's fury knew no bounds. He ordered a nationwide manhunt for anyone connected to the plot. He launched a reign of terror that would continue until the final days of the war. Thousands were arrested, hundreds were executed. And among them was a man who had been working against the Nazi regime for nearly a decade, Hans Oster. But who was Hans Oster? And how did a high-ranking German officer become one of Hitler's most dangerous enemies? Hans Paul Oster was born on August 9th, 1887 in Dresden, into a deeply religious Protestant family. His father was a pastor, but young Hans chose a different path: the military. He joined the artillery in 1907 and served with honor during World War I, rising to the rank of captain within the prestigious German General Staff. The war ended in defeat, and like millions of Germans, Oster was devastated by the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was stripped of territory, forced to pay crushing reparations, and had its military reduced to only 100,000 troops. In the chaos of the post-war years, Oster continued his military career, eventually reaching the rank of major by 1929. But personal scandals struck. In 1932, he was forced to resign after an affair with a fellow officer's wife. It seemed his military career was over. Then came Adolf Hitler. When Hitler seized power in January 1933, Oster actually supported the Nazi regime at first. Like many Germans, he believed the Nazis would restore Germany's honor and rebuild the shattered nation. Within months, Oster joined the Abwehr, Nazi Germany's military intelligence service. But his support wouldn't last long. The Nazis moved quickly to consolidate power. They crushed political opposition and established concentration camps like Dachau to imprison their enemies. Churches were pressured to conform to Nazi beliefs. Books by Jewish, liberal, and Marxist authors were burned in massive public displays. But the event that truly shattered Oster's faith in the regime came in June 1934, the Night of the Long Knives. During this bloody purge, Hitler ordered the SS to assassinate Ernst Röhm and other leaders of the rival SA paramilitary organization. But the killings didn't stop there. Political opponents were also targeted, including former Chancellor General Kurt von Schleicher and Major General Ferdinand von Bredow. Von Bredow was Oster's friend and the former head of the Abwehr. These murders transformed Oster's disappointment into active resistance. Under the leadership of Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, the new Abwehr chief, Oster began building a secret network of anti-Nazi officers and officials. His position gave him extraordinary access to classified information, fake documents, and restricted communications. He used all of it to undermine Hitler. The Blomberg-Fritsch affair of 1938, in which Hitler forced two senior generals from power on made-up charges, turned Oster's dislike into outright hatred. In 1938, Oster met Colonel General Ludwig Beck, the chief of the General Staff, who openly opposed Hitler's plans to invade Czechoslovakia. When Beck resigned under pressure, he was replaced by Franz Halder, who secretly described Hitler as the incarnation of evil. Together, Oster, Beck, and Halder planned Germany's first military coup. The plan was bold: storm the Reich Chancellery, arrest or kill Hitler, and restore the German monarchy under Prince Wilhelm of Prussia. But the conspiracy depended on Hitler making an obvious move toward war. When British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Hitler at Munich in September 1938 and agreed to the breakup of Czechoslovakia, the plot collapsed. Hitler was hailed as a diplomatic genius, and the conspirators lost their chance. However, what happened next would change everything. When World War II erupted on September 1st, 1939, opposing Hitler became even more dangerous. But Oster refused to back down. In one of the most brazen acts of treason in military history, he began secretly passing German invasion plans to the Dutch military attaché in Berlin, Bert Sass. Oster warned the Netherlands more than 20 times about the coming German attack. He even referred to Hitler as the pig who has departed for the front in the West. Tragically, the Dutch government didn't believe the warnings. On May 10, 1940, Germany invaded, and the Netherlands fell within 6 days. Despite the risk, Oster continued his resistance work. By 1941, after Hitler launched the invasion of the Soviet Union and the systematic murder of European Jews began, Oster established contact with Colonel Henning von Trescow's resistance network in Army Group Center. In 1943, Oster's network supplied British-made bombs for 2 assassination attempts on Hitler. Both failed due to technical problems. The first attempt in March 1943 involved smuggling explosives onto Hitler's personal aircraft, disguised as a bottle of cognac. The bomb was set to go off mid-flight, but the trigger failed in the freezing cargo hold. Days later, another conspirator, Colonel Rudolf von Gersdorf, carried explosives into a Berlin museum, where Hitler was scheduled to tour a captured Soviet weapons exhibition. Gersdorf planned to blow himself up alongside Hitler in a suicide attack. But Hitler rushed through the exhibit in minutes instead of the planned 30, forcing Gersdorf to frantically disarm the bombs in a bathroom before they exploded. Yet even this would pale in comparison to what was coming. In April 1943, the Gestapo arrested Hans von Dohnanyi, one of Oster's closest partners in the Abwehr. Dohnanyi had been caught smuggling Jews to Switzerland by disguising them as Abwehr agents. During his arrest, incriminating documents were found on his desk. Dohnanyi whispered a note to Oster, who tried to remove the papers but was immediately caught. Oster was placed under house arrest and dismissed from the Abwehr. His dismissal was a devastating blow to the resistance, leaving the network in chaos at a critical moment. For over a year, Oster remained under Gestapo surveillance, knowing his fate could be sealed at any moment. That moment came on July 21, 1944, one day after the failed assassination attempt. But before we get to that, we need to understand just how close Germany was to total collapse. By April 1945, the war was nearly lost. Soviet forces were closing in from the east. American and British forces were advancing from the west. Berlin was surrounded. The concentration camps were being liberated one by one, revealing the horrific evidence of the Holocaust to the world. Yet even in these final desperate weeks, Hitler remained obsessed with punishing those who had dared to oppose him. On April 4, 1945, Admiral Canaris's personal diaries were discovered by the SS. The diaries contained detailed records of the resistance activities within the Abwehr. Hitler flew into a rage and ordered the immediate execution of all conspirators named in the documents, including Hans Oster. The executions weren't about justice or military necessity. They were acts of pure vengeance from a dying regime. On April 8, 1945, an SS drumhead court-martial was held at Flossenbürg concentration camp. Oster, along with Admiral Canaris, theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and several others, were convicted in a fake trial, led by SS Judge Otto Thorbeck. The verdicts were already decided. All were sentenced to death. What makes this particularly disturbing is that these men knew the war was already over. Germany would surrender in less than a month. Allied forces were miles away. Liberation was coming. But Hitler's thirst for revenge wouldn't be stopped. In the cold, grey dawn of April 9, 1945, just 1 month before the war's end, gallows were hastily built in the courtyard of Flossenbürg. Hans Oster, now 57 years old, was ordered to strip completely naked. He was led to the scaffold in front of SS guards and other prisoners, exposed and humiliated. By Hitler's explicit orders, Oster was hanged with a thin hemp rope. The Germans grimly called it piano wire. In some cases, this barbaric method caused the condemned to strangle slowly over as long as 20 minutes. The execution was designed not just to kill, but to humiliate and terrorize. Oster was forced to endure this final humiliation alongside men he had worked with for years. Admiral Canaris, the head of the Abwehr who had shielded Oster's resistance activities for nearly a decade, was executed the same morning. So was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Lutheran pastor and theologian who had courageously spoken out against Nazi persecution of the Jews. These men, who had risked everything to stop Hitler's regime, were murdered just weeks before Allied forces would liberate the camp and Germany would surrender. However, the true story of Hans Oster doesn't end with his death. Oster faced his execution with extraordinary courage. Fabian von Schlabrendorf, one of the few senior resistance members to survive the war, later described Oster as a man such as God meant men to be, lucid and serene of mind, steady in danger. After his death, Oster's body was buried in the Nordfriedhof Cemetery in Dresden. Hans Oster's story is one of extraordinary moral courage in the face of absolute evil. He risked his life, his family, and his honor to oppose a regime that had plunged the world into war and genocide. While his efforts ultimately failed to stop Hitler, Oster's legacy lives on as proof of the power of individual conscience and the refusal to submit to tyranny. The July 20th plotters, including Oster, have been recognized after death as heroes of the German resistance. Their sacrifice reminds us that even in humanity's darkest hours, there are those who choose to stand against evil no matter the cost. The irony was unmistakable. Oster had spent years trying to save Germany from Hitler. In the end, the country he loved executed him for treason. Oster left behind his wife Gertrude and 3 children, who survived the war despite the shame the Nazi regime tried to attach to the family name. In the decades since, historians have increasingly recognized Oster not as a traitor, but as a patriot who understood that true loyalty to one's country sometimes means opposing its government. His willingness to commit what the Nazis called treason was actually the highest form of moral courage, choosing conscience over comfort, principle over personal safety, and human decency over blind obedience. That's the tragic but inspiring story of General Major Hans Oster, the spy who betrayed Hitler to save his country. If this story moved you, make sure you subscribe right now. Drop a comment below and let us know, would you have had the courage to resist like Oster did? Thanks for watching, and please share this video with people who care. We'll see you in the next one.